Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of CloudBites Conversations, where I'm really, really excited to have someone with us who's an author and a speaker at multiple events, has been in the ecosystem for a long time as well, and has lots and lots of interesting stories and anecdotes and kind of lessons that they can teach us. But more importantly, one of the reasons I'm really interested in talking to this person is the stuff that they write about is, I think, the stuff that's perhaps underserved a lot in the ecosystem. So, welcome to the podcast, Pei Mun Lim. Thank you for
Hi,
coming.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
No, thank you for coming. So, do you want to start off by just giving us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, your background, kind of how you got into Salesforce? Because everyone we have on the podcast seems to have stumbled into Salesforce. I've yet to have anyone come on and say like, "Oh no, I planned this." So, are you the first person to come on and say that they've planned a career in Salesforce?
Oh, that's a very interesting story, actually. So the short answer is no, but so I started my career after I finished my computer science degree, Coventry University used to be a polytechnic before that. Only because I wanted. So I'm a Trekkie. I wanted to be programming the robots on the spaceship that I really wanted to get on after I graduate. But unlucky for me, there was no USS Enterprise. And lucky for me, I guess, also I found out that I was not very good at programming, but I came away with a really good understanding of databases and systems and infrastructure. And so my first role actually was with a Microsoft partner. So I trained Microsoft Office initially, and then my boss had a free exam voucher for a Windows NT 3.1 exam and said, "Do you want to do this exam? It expires in a week." I took it, I failed it, and I thought, "Oh, this is interesting. I should pursue further," and that is what I did. And I got onto the certification program, and I was one of the first Microsoft certified systems engineer in Malaysia in like '96, where where my career kind of like went. Worked with different Microsoft partners. I was a SQL DBA. I was a data architect. And then when Microsoft CRM came out, Dynamic CRM in 2005, 2006, I jumped on that bandwagon, and it was really fun. Um, and I was a client-facing consultant for a really long time, and I decided, to try my hand doing project management, which is what I did also. And so around 2012, I felt like I've run the gamut of all the projects that I wanted to do, all the roles I wanted to do within the Microsoft consulting ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
and was wondering where next. I also had a small stint as the end client program manager. So I felt like, oh, I've done all I want to do. And a friend of mine who moved to Salesforce said, "Why don't you come over and check this out?" And when you're stuck in an ecosystem, and Microsoft is vast, because that's where I started. And there's a Malay saying, macam kata di bawah tempurung, what it means is it's like a frog in a coconut shell. So if you're the frog, you think the coconut shell is your world. And that's how I felt. Microsoft is so big. Everyone has the tech stack. You've got the operating system. You've got the server system. You have BizTalk. You've got SharePoint. You got all of that. What else could there be? And I decided to check it out. So I went on LinkedIn. I reached out to a few Salesforce partners and said, "Hey, look, this is my background. I have zero Salesforce experience. Would you like to take me on? I can function as a project manager, and I think a CRM is a CRM is a CRM, but willing to learn." And so Make Positive at that time was the company that took a chance on me. And that's how I ended up in the Salesforce ecosystem. That was 2013, 2014, and that's kind of where I stayed.
Oh wow! So the point you make there about the frog in the coconut shell, it's one of the interesting things I think about for a lot of people in the Salesforce space. So a lot of people in the Salesforce space have come from what I'm going to say is a more either business focused or kind of, I'm going to use the term non-traditional, but when I say non-traditional, I think you're in fact one of the few people we've had on the podcast who has a computer science degree. I don't even, I have no computer science background. So, most people we have on here don't even come from that world and have come across. And so what I mean by this is I think it's quite interesting for a lot of these people that come in that they get very comfortable with Salesforce because it's, I don't want to call it a gateway kind of drug to technology, but it really is. It's very quick and easy. It's easy for you to get going with. And then you can start doing more and more technical pieces, but the lead-in is quite comfortable. One of the things I've been talking to people about is kind of telling people to learn other technologies. So it's not just, you're not just all in on Salesforce, which is a great piece of technology, don't get me wrong, but you also have some skills in it. Do you think would you, from your experience, say that that's a good thing for people to start doing? Is in general, not really commenting on Salesforce's future, I think, but just in general, do you think that having more experience with more technology really kind of makes you a broader person, makes you better at things?
It can't be bad for you. I think just having experience in broader technology allows you to understand what are the things that are common across everything. So project delivery is very, very common. All the challenges that we're talking about, all the things that drive people crazy trying to implement a solution, and understanding the difference between a bad implementation and a bad platform. A lot of people, especially end users, find it very difficult to make that difference or understand that difference. And a very broad brush will say Salesforce is really bad, not understanding that it's been designed poorly, or maybe the selection of the platform was designed poorly. So I think when you have a broader experience, you can provide those sort of nuance, and you can help an organization make better choices overall.
So when that point you say about and I've seen this before, where something goes wrong on a project, or there's some misalignment on what's expected for Salesforce can do versus what it actually does, or what's being delivered. It's often that thing of, well, Salesforce is terrible. It's like, well, Salesforce is actually very good. Your implementation of it might not be great, or your understanding of how to use that implementation might not be great. Do you think that problem is more pronounced in the Salesforce ecosystem or not? Because I always wonder, with Salesforce's focus on how quick and easy things are to set up, do you think it often leads to, based upon your experience, do you think there's more misaligned expectations in the Salesforce world, or is it just, is it a commonality across everywhere that people just have misaligned expectations sometimes?
I think it's common. So when I started in the Microsoft Dynamics world, the company that I was working at also had an SAP practice and a Siebel practice at that time. And what I hear from then, the problem still persists. You're talking about expectation misalignment. First of all, you've got all those software companies who are trying to sell as much as possible. And their intentions are, I kind of don't care that our product doesn't solve your problem. I will tell you it is. It will. And I will give you discounts to do so. And I will compel my partners to implement it anyway, or they will not get any leads from me. So this particular framework, this particular way of doing things persists regardless of the vendors, the software, the platform, the client. It is human nature, I believe. The technology is slightly different. What they can do is slightly different, but in essence, the behavior that drives how software is sold and how we tell them that this thing will solve everything and bring them a lot more sales, and therefore they should buy more license from us, it persists everywhere. But the thing about Salesforce is that they're very, very good at sales and marketing, with the plushies, with the trailhead and trailblazer and the community and they are so good at this that it just kind of exacerbates a problem a little bit more. People are seduced into the product. It is a good product for different problems and different clients, but the line between, is this the right software for you in terms of functionality, and is it the right software in the long term based on your organizational maturity and capability, those questions don't get asked. And then when things go wrong, it's so easy to say it is a bad platform because the users don't have that maturity to make that distinction. The implementers are compelled and to behave in a certain way. Otherwise, they're not going to get business, and they're going to have to lay off people. And it's just a perpetual cycle.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. One of the big when I launched Groundwork Apps, my ISV, it was after I kind of found myself without a job, which is always a wonderful time to start thinking. And one of the things that I'd noticed running SI partners and other running teams and things like that is how expensive Salesforce had become to set up. And one of the big conundrums, as an example, I had a project I was working on where the customer had paid for Salesforce, but it was going to be sort of 12 months before they were going to be able to use it. And they'd signed the contract, signed on the dotted line, everything was okay, but they had 12 months to wait because of the time it was going to take to implement the ERP system they bought with it, implement this part, implement that part. And a lot of it is down to technical constraints and because they wanted a customized process. Parts of it were down to the fact that they weren't willing to accept certain MVP steps and hadn't really planned for that in the implementation plan that they'd kind of come up with. But I do think that it is a real conundrum. One of the bugbears I have, one of the things that I have sworn on my life I would never ever do if I ever ran another consulting partner is quick starts, because they're just, to me, they're one of these things that I don't think anyone's ever had a quick start go where everyone's ended up happy with it. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it's
I believe you're correct that it's got more expensive. So that feels at odds with this is so easy for you. You can stand up an instant and start using it straight away. That is true for a very narrow set of scenarios. One is that somebody like me, for example, I've got a reasonably technical background. I could pick it up and I could stand it up to my requirements very quickly. I could do all the trailhead and just get it, so that scenario is true for me in terms of quick starts. However, it is not so suitable for a lot of people that they are marketing it to. The licenses are expensive, and also a lot of partners don't quite know how to set proper expectations. Say, okay, if this is a 5-day quick start, a lot of things have to happen before day one, and you've got to prep the client, and they have to already think about sales processes. They already have to think about what they want to migrate and how to clean. And the thing with quick starts is that there's not enough of that prep work. And when I was working at MP at the time, we were looking at that, and I made sure that there was a lot of prep work. There was questions about, is it billable, is it not billable, or do we fold it into the costs? But it had to be done before you kickstart your rapid, quick start, whatever you want to call it. And very strong expectations need to be set around the boundaries. And it is challenging from a few point of view. One is a lot of partners will give quick starts to junior consultants. Who are not used to having difficult conversations with the client to say, hey, we said that we will migrate these. You had to get them into these templates, and it had to be clean, but you didn't clean them. And now it's taking a lot more than that half day we agreed, or whatever that might be. And then after that, it's how to manage the client. So you don't train your consultant it is a wrong type of project to give them. You don't prep the customer, and their expectations, being a very small business, maybe 1-2 man company, again, being human, you want to make sure that what you're paying for, which is a lot of money for them, a small business, for 5 days, 10 days, to get what they need in, you know, format that they needed to work. And no one's told them this. No one has set the expectations, telling them we're going to customize 3 objects. It makes no sense to them. What does that mean? So there's already so many elements that are challenging. So I would agree with you. I think Salesforce isn't very suitable for quick starts for those reasons.
I think one of the interesting things you've hit on there as well is that giving it to junior consultants. And one of the things that there was a partner that I didn't work with but knew through the ecosystem, and knew a few of the people that work there through the ecosystem. And one of the things that they said that this kind of the management of this partner had as a view was that you needed to go through bad projects early on in your career as kind of a baptism of fire, sort of for want of a phrase. And I remember hearing it, and it just being it was almost the worst kind of thing I've ever heard, because I remember when I first started out, and as you say, like, you never want to have hard conversations. They're called hard conversations for a reason. No one wants them. And as a junior consultant, you need someone to help guide you and teach you these things, understand, and to show you what good looks like. And I just remember this hearing about this partner that was like, no, what we're going to do is just throw people into the fire, and they'll learn. Like, effectively, we'll throw them into the water and let them learn how to swim before they drown, and we'll come in and save them if they look like they're about to drown, which just seems such a bad way of doing it. Such a terrible way.
It is horrible, and it is lazy. Looking back, but everybody did that. I can say that with hindsight. Everyone did that. Oracle partners, Siebel, SAP, Salesforce, Microsoft, all did that. And it is, looking back, it works in a certain way, because you're right. Those who don't drown actually turn out to be excellent consultants. However, the sea is littered with the bodies of those who did not make it. And that's very harsh, but actually that translates to massive mental health issues. Those people who you wouldn't do that to a child.
No,
right?
exactly.
You wouldn't say, okay, go out into the world, and if you survive, well done, you're going to be one of those kick-ass adults. But no, you can create great consultants without imposing trauma on them. Good. And I think it's not a great way of doing things, which is something that I'm trying to push against.
Yeah, I think there's going to be there might be a new term we can come up with just something like consulting Darwinism or something like that, for like a terrible way of kind of viewing the world for doing it. So you mentioned obviously that you're trying to change the way that's done. So obviously you mentioned about how you were working at Make Positive and how you had a number of roles, and I know you had a number of kind of other roles within other partners as well. So, but about 7 years ago, I think it was roughly, you launched Zenhao. So can you tell us a little bit about making the switch over to running things for yourself, why you went to do your own setup? And also, I'd love to know what Zenhao means, literally, because I tried Google. I think it's, and this is my guess, so I think it's 2 words, Zen and How, and I think it's like good way or something like that. Is that correct?
It's something. What it means is it's Mandarin kind of like translation is Zenhao, which is very good. Okay. So I wanted a name that reflected one of my values, which is excellence. Throughout all my projects, it was something that I carried through. As a consultant, I always say your client's actually paying you for your competence and your excellence. So this is something that I took with me, and I Phonetically, it should be Tzenhao, but I felt that that wasn't something that was easy for people to say, so I just dropped the T to become Zenhao. Um, that came about when I was at CAP. So I worked at CAP Gemini,
Mm-hmm.
and we noticed at the time, 2016, 17, the ecosystem was really hot. If you had a pulse and you had a certification, you could get a job, which was what we saw. And the challenge for us then and for a lot of partners, and I had a lot of friends around, was there wasn't really strong onboarding or training. You were hired, and then straight away you expected to run a workshop or manage a client or do something. So one of the things that I did, so at CAP, I was what they call an engagement manager, which is a project manager. Basically, I ended up onboarding and inducting all the new hires,
Mm-hmm.
not just into my team, but into other teams, because, the new hires and grads would network and talk about it. And what I found out was, while there was Trailhead and there was so many training for the hard skills,
Mm-hmm.
doing data models and how do you build stuff and flows and all of that, there was literally no training on the consulting skills. So things like professional behavior, how to manage yourself in front of clients, and from discovery to the business analysis side. So this is also a big thing. In the olden days, the BA was a very specialized skill. So you got a large enterprise project, you would have a purist business analyst who was very technology agnostic, there to just look at processes. So I came from an environment, enterprise organizations, where that was true. And
Mm-hmm.
then move into like Microsoft Dynamics and Salesforce. And then there was an expectation that if you're an admin or consultant, that you should already know business analysis skills, which
Mm-hmm.
was not true. Um, and so I thought that I would develop a training that just focused on the business analysis skills, how to ask questions, how to listen. So how to listen is very important to me. So I volunteer as a Samaritan over here in the UK, which is a crisis phone line for people who are feeling suicidal. So listening was a skill that I found quite lacking in many consultants. So I built that into my program, how to write solid requirements with acceptance criteria that were accurate. So the other thing that I found was that as I got better with my listening, a lot of my projects just stayed green. So in project management terms, that just means that everything's humming along nicely, because there just wasn't very much human drama, because I would
Mm-hmm.
coach my team to listen to each other. We'd listen to the client. We would be able to tactfully diffuse things before it came to a head. So I would be assigned red projects to turn around. And a lot of the times I realized that discovery wasn't being done properly, documentation wasn't being done properly, assumptions were incorrect. So in my training, everything I'm focusing on, how do we make sure that we can deliver a project that's, for the partner, that would limit any legal exposure,
Mm-hmm.
and for the client, that they are getting what they need, not what we think they need, or what we believe they need because of what they've told us. And sometimes people tell us things that are not entirely true. So by actually putting in the listening and questioning skills into my coaching of my team and this program, we just cut through all of that. So most of
Mm-hmm.
my projects would finish very nicely without any drama. And so I decided that that's something I wanted to focus on. And also COVID came around, and my contract with an ISV, Fontiva, was just coming to an end, and I thought I will just go all in doing
Mm-hmm.
this because there was a need for it, and no one was doing it. That's kind of how my company came about.
No, that's a really interesting story and a really nice genesis as well. So one of the things you mentioned there is about business analysis skills, and how there is this presumption of admins and consultants being business analysts, and it's something that you and I both know Jodie Herbeck and her book Rock Your Role as a Salesforce Admin, and one of the things that she really hits on in that is kind of a large amount of that book is about actually business analysis as well as being an admin, if that makes sense. Do you think then, because one of the things that happened a few years ago is Salesforce made a shift to having a separate business analyst certification and a separate business analyst role that they were defining. Do you think that there is now still a need for these technology agnostic business admins? And the reason I asked the question is one of the interesting things I think about Salesforce is it is in some areas quite an opinionated product. So, for example, with sales, it is very opinionated that this is what a lead is, this is what a contact is, this is what an account is, this is what an opportunity is, here's how these things fit together. And it's really based upon how probably Mark Benioff originally thought they should fit together and less about even customer usage now. So with those sorts of strong opinions, do you think that there is still a need for that separate BA role, or do you think it's something that is a much better fit as a skill set for a consultant or for an admin?
I think that's a very, very interesting question. With the certification, so if I just look at that thread and I pull on that, just going back, I think the fact that there wasn't a BA certification, there wasn't a focus on BA skills, did the ecosystem a disservice. So extra focus on the business analysis functionality within the project delivery is fantastic. I think the certification is meant to address the fact that this is important, but I think that the way that I don't have an answer for this, so I'm just sharing my observation. So when it first came out, there was a prerequisite that you had to be a BA for 2 years before you got the certification, although there was no way to enforce it, right? So everyone brand new would go for the BA cert and get that, which in turn kind of devalues it in the job market, because there was no way to verify if this person actually understands what it means to write user story and gather requirements. The other part of your question around, is there a need for a separate pure BA? I think that depends on the project and the program manager, and again, the organizational maturity to understand the critical role that a BA plays and how it needs to blend into the technology stack that you're going to implement. So it might be in an enterprise environment. Salesforce is not the only software there. You're going to be integrating with NetSuite, any number of background technology. And so a pure BA to serve all of that would be very, very useful. But if you're just talking about Salesforce, then a BA with Salesforce background and understanding will be able to write requirements that are easier to be translated into software engineering language and terms that a development team can understand, and therefore optimizing the delivery a lot more. I don't know if I'm answering the question.
No, that's a perfect answer. That makes a lot of sense, and I completely agree. I think in my experience, I found that in bigger enterprise projects where there are multiple systems being implemented or coordinated together, then a BA, and this is just me, I think, paraphrasing back what I think I've understood from what you're saying, having that dedicated resource who is technology agnostic in there is the much better way of doing it. I think for the implementations I've done, which are just Salesforce, and even might be just taking existing systems and migrating them onto Salesforce, I feel that works much, much better when it's a BA who has Salesforce experience and Salesforce understanding and knowledge, to kind of really help drive that through. Because it is, I worked on one project where there was some business analysts who had kind of worked on a more legacy setup and system beforehand that was moving over to Salesforce. And one of the problems we faced was just them understanding the system setup, understanding kind of some of the nomenclature. And, there was obviously a bit of that was our education to do that for them, but just helping them understand a newer model of things rather than it being, they were very used to writing sort of, they were very used to doing very big waterfall documents because they'd done them for 30 years. And so kind of migrating to like, well, look, we'll build this, then we'll change it. But they're like, well, we can't change it once it's written. It's like, well, we can. This is easy to change. And, I think that there's a big case of that. On your point around the certification and the devaluing of it, one of the things I've always had as a little interesting wonder is whether Salesforce should break some of the certifications up and put time limits in between them. And so what I mean by that, and this is just an idea that's a Paul idea in his head, so this is a stupid idea, but so say for like the admin side, I think also says you should have been working with Salesforce for 12 months or something like that. I think the BA1 says 2 years. But instead of having one admin exam, you should actually have two. And so it should be admin part 1 and admin part 2. And the rule is that you're not allowed to take admin part 2 until at least a year after you've taken admin part 1. And the idea being that it would kind of force you to have actually worked for so long. Because one of the things I see is people online saying I'm taking 10 certifications in however long there was, people that have done 20 certifications in 2 years or whatever. And there's a strong part of me that always wonders how much they've actually learned and understood the material versus how much they've actually just prepared for an exam. Because, I've got 20 odd certs and it's taken me 15 something odd years to get them. And I've banged my head against a lot of problems in that time. And I didn't get a certificate until I'd been working with Salesforce for about a year, 2 years. So I think that, I don't know. It's an idea that I've always had as to whether Salesforce could do that to kind of just slow that pipeline down, but also really kind of add value to them. Like with a degree, there's no way that you can. One of the values of a degree is that that someone's gone through 3 years of university for it, or even if they've compressed it down, it's still they're unlikely to have gone through it in like 6 months.
You have cracked open a door that I want to push wide open right now, and it's going to be the first time I'm publicly going to talk about this, right? So the question is, do I think that Salesforce cares about the quality of the implementers within the ecosystem? And certification is one way of looking at things, right? I'm just going to segue slightly, but I'll get back to the point in a minute. So one of the best things that's come out recently, the last couple of years, is the well-architected program. That's the one thing that I was in my role and capacity as project manager. I was a delivery manager and director for a little bit. That was really important because it tells me if the person who's applying for the job is really competent or not. It actually provides for me as an implementer and a delivery person a yardstick. So all other certifications tests whether you know how to do something. Nothing tests whether you know how to do something right at the right time, in the right way, for the right context, with all the nuances that go with it. Now, the well-architected program was something that pulled it all in, and I loved it so much. I would direct everyone I know to go to that microsite, how to draw diagrams, how to think about diagrams, how to think about integration, the pillars that they talk about, why it's important, how do you check and make sure that your integration pattern is correct, how to spot when things are wrong. And that was such an incredible resource because it helped everyone do things right. And it was disbanded to my disappointment because there is now such a big focus on Agentforce and on AI and how, Salesforce is investing in hiring AEs and not solution engineers and disbanding the well-architected team. And so that tells me that the focus is on margin and less on implementation, quality, and excellence. Because I can't think of anything else that would help the whole ecosystem in one, how do you say, just the one program that has such a wide reach to help everyone elevate the quality. So tying it back to your question, yes, they should. Will they? Highly unlikely. There's so many more things that they could do. But this was just like a small thing. Sorry to get on. I felt really strongly about this.
No, it's a really good point. And so it's we kind of, in the way that the episodes have been done recently, the well-architected disbandment has, I think, kind of fallen between a couple of the episodes in there. So it's the first time we've had anyone on since it's been announced to mention it. And I want to add, I fully agree with you. The well-architected framework was one of the best resources out there, and really, I think, kind of showed that Salesforce was actually ready to be viewed as an enterprise system. I know when I've been doing some implementations with, when you first go into some of these big organizations, there is a guy that sits there who's an enterprise architect, and they've got they've got all of this experience. But they're like, well, I've been an enterprise architect here for 33 years, and we've got 2,000. There was one person I worked with once who was like, oh, I was on the board that wrote the paper for that kind of authentication spec. And I was like, okay, well, this person knows what they're doing. But then showing that well-architected framework did give a lot of credibility. So I fully agree that it's on there. I also agree that Salesforce, if Salesforce want to take up my idea on the certification piece, please come and reach out to me because I would love that. But I unfortunately agree with you that it's unlikely to be a focus area for them. Which is a shame because I really feel that these certifications should be valuable as well. I've learned a lot through doing them, but I do think that there is a strong push for. I think there's almost been too much gamification of it, so that it's like, look how many badges and certificates I can earn, rather than look what I've learned and how I understand it. So one of the things, so we've mentioned a few times, the importance of getting those requirements and the BA role and understanding, and you mentioned kind of the discoveries hadn't been done. So I think that's a lovely segue onto your first book, which I have here to show everyone, which is get the angle right, Salesforce Discovery 101, which is a fantastic book. And there is a review I've posted of this book, must be a couple of years ago now, which will be linked somewhere here on the screen in the show notes. He says, making a note. So tell us a little bit about Salesforce Discovery 101, the inception of it, and why did you write Salesforce Discovery 101, I suppose, is the question.
I think it goes back to the fact that I just saw so many poor implementations, and how a lot of red projects could be traced back to very poor discovery. And I thought, what's the one thing that I could do that could have the most impact in quality of projects? And that's how the idea came about. I've been thinking about it for so long that I had all the content in my head, and I kind of challenged myself to write it in, I think, 45 days it was. I really felt that I could do it. because all the content was already there in my head. And because I was also coaching people how to do it, I was also coaching partners how to run it properly. Like I said, the content was there, and it was just a matter of tying it in a story that would make it relatable. And how might I write something that's easily digestible for myself when I was entering the ecosystem? What would level me up as quick as possible without trying to drown me by kicking me into the deep end? That was my focus, to help new consultants understand what needed to be done, how they needed to do it in order to set up the project for success. And I felt writing that book would get me that kind of reach, to help people do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good book, and one of the things that I love when you just mentioned there about the story in it and telling that story, one of the best things about this book is the narrative and the story. I remember when sitting down to write my very exciting books on Apex, that one of the things I was trying hard to do, which whether or not I succeeded is a very different question, was try and tell a story throughout them, because I think you learn more when there is a narrative and a flow, and you feel like you're building on things that have happened before, and you're actually going through the journey rather than here's a bunch of information, off you go. And it's so I really love the story through it, and I think that narrative works really, really well.
Thank you.
Do you think that discoveries are often missed due to cost constraints, or why do you think that discoveries are often done poorly or just missed, or things like that? Do you think there's a problem with the expense of them and people not seeing the value, or do you think that's because people just do them badly, that people don't see them as valuable because they're done badly?
I think a bit of column A, a bit of column B. I think almost all of the above in different flavors and shapes and form. But generally, I think as customers, as people, we don't want to pay for things that we don't believe is valuable. I really like to give the example of, self-diagnosing when you've got Google, right? I've got I've got chest pain. I Googled it. It looks like I need X. You go to the doctor and you say, hey, doc, it sounds like I need an angioplasty. My research shows that that's going to cost me X amount. That's what I have in the bank. Can you go ahead and do that? That's a lot of people in terms of how they approach things, and the perception of how correct they are and the risks of what they're thinking about is quite skewed. We always think that we are right when we're having discussions and arguments. And I think it is incumbent on the trusted advisor, the doctor, the surgeon, the consultant, the Salesforce partner to say, hey, you might be right, but before I embark on a highly risky, expensive, and path that may cost you a lot and cost me a lot, I think I need to do my own tests and diagnosis to figure out whether it really is this angioplasty or the stent that you need, or maybe you just have a bad case of gas. Let's figure it out together. So when I reframe it that way, then a lot of people will say, okay, right, that kind of makes sense. Yeah. But for those who don't, and again, we go back to the difficult conversation, you might have a very highly opinionated patient or customer who pushes hard and say, well, my previous doctor said it is this, and I'm not willing to pay any more tests.
Yeah.
I believe that this is it. Can you just go and do it? I can't do it myself, but can you do it? Now, when you're faced with a client who has very strong personalities, then a lot of partners, a lot of people aren't able to stand with their boundaries and say, okay, right, if you want me to go ahead, I can, but these are the risks. As I'm actually going through the angioplasty, these are all the really horrible things that can go wrong. And these are the potential outcomes. So back to project delivery terms, we're doing this time and material. I can go in and attempt to fix your org. You say that is just two flows that need fixing, but upon further investigation, it's really messy and horrible down there, and there's no way I can do your two flows because your data model's wrong and data hygiene and all these other reasons, and I may have to just stop, and that might leave you in a worse state than you are now. Do you understand? Sign this release form. No, there's no such thing in Salesforce. Nobody does that. Everyone wants a happy customer and go, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure it's an angioplasty you need. Let me just go in and get it done. And you are happy and I'm happy. So very few people will want to have that conversation, which ends up all these things being, much worse than it was or could have been.
Yeah, I mean, as a little story on this, as an aside, the worst project I have ever been on was one where we were brought in. I was brought in to lead a partner team at the kind of 11th hour, and when I say 11th hour, I mean probably like 11:48. And the customer had gone through all this thing, all the process, and they had an RFP, and I was asked to basically agree to the partner had fallen through, and I was asked, would we take it over with the existing terms and things? And I was like, we can't do that. Yeah, we need a discovery, and kind of the account executive and the Salesforce team at the time were very kind of pushing for us to do it because it was near the end of the year and all these things. And so, and I got some pressure from other people internally on my side because it was a large thing. So we ended up signing off on it and doing it. And it was just the worst project ever because there was just misaligned expectations everywhere. People didn't understand. And yeah, I would just say to everyone that, it would have been much better for me to have just turned around and said, sorry, no, and just walked away. I'd have saved, okay, would the organization have made its money? Probably not. And, it might have caused other problems and issues with that. But at the same time, it would have just saved the biggest headache. So, it's a learning lesson. Thankfully, that was a long time ago, and I've learned the lesson since then. But it is one of those things that's very hard to do. And, there are a lot of places where there is pressure from those around you to just focus on the dollars and cents.
As I always say to partners and clients, it will extract a price, not doing discovery. Either the partner's got to pay for it or the client's got to pay for it, but you pay for it with like stress and technical debt and all these other things. Someone's got to pay for it. And it makes more sense to pay for it properly and have it done well.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, everyone going in with their eyes open is always a much better position. One of the things so I try to avoid too much talking about AI on the podcast because I think that every podcast at the moment is just talking about AI. But you'll have to indulge me a little bit as I go into a question on it, which is I've seen one of the big things I think that is going to be a struggle with the new world of generative agentic AI, whatever we want to call it, because the buzz term will change next week. And using that to deliver software is the discovery piece, because I've actually seen kind of suggestions that, excuse me, that there's going to be no need for kind of BAs anymore. What's going to happen is you'll have a discovery session where the customer tells you, and it all goes into a system, and the AI goes away and builds it, understands it, which I will hands up, put on record, I think is utter nonsense that's ever going to happen. But I'm keen to see and hear your thoughts on kind of, how do you think there's a place where AI is helpful in these situations and how it can be utilized? Or do you think it's just going to do you think that the human element and that understanding of that interaction, because I've always said that the best work I've ever done is when I've sat with someone and I've gone, do you mean this? And they've gone, no. And I've gone, oh, you mean this? And they go, oh, that's a bit closer. And that be back and forth and really understanding what they want. Do you think that that's going to be where it is, or do you think there is a place where we will be able to have generative AI understand what was said and produce, good detailed requirements, as you mentioned earlier on, to do that BA role almost?
There are many threads in there.
Yes. Sorry, I know it's a very broad question.
No, it's really interesting actually, because I think about this a lot because I've got children. They're all teenagers, and I think about that a lot. Just segueing slightly. So if I were to draw a line, I would say pick up the pandemic, for example. Those of us who worked before then in the working world, as you've just mentioned, shadowing someone, being next to them, almost like an apprentice of sorts, means that you can actually absorb the behavior by osmosis, tacitly, the knowledge and the shared wisdom and understanding. And therefore, you can up your game and you get to a place where you can notice when something isn't quite right. You may not be able to put your finger on it, but you might be able, you get a sense this is not going the right direction because of XYZ. The graduates that enter the working force where they don't have that personal interaction do not have the context of how do I know when things aren't right? Let me ask Google, let me ask AI. And I don't have enough experience to know if what they're saying is correct, truthful, accurate, or suitable in this particular context. They don't have that. And so moving forward, I think the people who will be able to utilize AI well will be those of us, I would say the pre-pandemic people, where we know what good looks like and we can say, hey, AI, this isn't quite right. I need you to do it this other way. So that's a skill that is very difficult to impart on the younger generations. They just don't have that. However, AI, as when implemented correctly, can coach the new and younger generation, the workforce, the leaders of the future, up to a particular level. And it's going to be very difficult for them to jump to where we are, where we have absorbed knowledge and wisdom, understanding, and experience from senior people who knew more than we did. And they will not get that experience of absorbing. So at the moment, I don't have a solution for closing that gap yet, but I want to make it a conversation that AI will not solve everything. It will coach people to a particular level, but how do we get them to jump that step?
Yeah.
Because all of us, I'm just drawing this arbitrary line of the COVID. All of us who have been in the workforce before then, we've learned through trial and error and mistakes, egg on our face, sleepless nights. We have learned value by going through pain. The newer generation will not get the opportunity because AI will give them a piece of code, they will use it, and they will not know why it's working and why it's not working, not having gone through stuff. And so we need to talk about that more and figure out how do we help them jump, how do we help them lead the AI movement and not let AI lead them into their careers and into business analysis. You can get AI to generate questions, but it won't know how to read back, as you say, the non-verbals, the energy of how sarcasm, for example, can read that. What do you do next? So it relies on that person to say, hey, the response sound a bit sarcastic. What should my response to that be? They won't know how to pick that up. And I don't have an answer right now.
No, that's, and I mean, the sarcasm one's a really, really good point because the number of times that I've been in discoveries or requirement sessions or demos or anything where you can you can kind of pick up on social cues as to whether something is important, isn't important. When different people walk into the room, even, and you notice that the mood shifts, or okay, we're not really, you can tell who's driving things, and who's got the important requirements and who's doing the talking a lot sometimes, shall we say. And I think that there's huge amounts of that I don't think can be captured properly. And just in one of the I read something recently where someone was I forget the person's name, but she was the first chief data decision scientist, I think was the title, at Google, and she runs an AI program now, and she was just saying that AI can look backwards but not forwards. And what's really interesting is that all these AI systems are doing is looking at what's been done before and making a good guess. And whilst that's very useful in making good guesses about what could come next, in a place where it's not about what's been done before and you're actively trying to make changes and differences, that's when the use breaks down. And I also think it's quite an interesting thing to kind of take that as a parallel to as you mentioned, that thing of those of us who work pre-COVID and post-COVID or whatever, where I have learned from what I've done previously and looked back on. And those unique experiences have made me, myself, unable to do these things, and therefore give me my unique perspective and useful advantage, or and you will have other perspectives and other advantages compared to me, and that's what makes a nice blended team. But I had this interesting thought the other day about, will AI have that same series of useful perspectives? Because effectively it's just trained on a data set, and so it's not necessarily going to have the diverse range of views that it could have. I think it's a fascinating area that there's definitely a lot of I use AI for a bunch of things to help me accelerate what I'm doing, but I never sit there and just accept what it says. I have to sit there and go, okay, great, this is helpful to produce. I said the other day that I used it to produce some boilerplate code for me. It saved me just typing out thousands of lines of CSS, which I have no desire to do. I could sit there and do it. I could copy and paste it and move it around, but that can do it for me. I still needed to fix it though and tweak it. So we've spoken a bit about obviously making the discovery and how important that is to making a project successful in the long term. One of the things you recently released, I think just before Christmas, in fact, was your second book, Successful Salesforce Project 101. So I had them prepared and everything. So this is currently on my reading list. So I will be reading through this. I just finished another Salesforce book for review earlier this week. So this is my next one and will be reviewed soon as well. But so as I haven't read it, and for those who haven't read it on the podcast, tell us about the book, why you wrote this one, and kind of who should look at this book and who it's aimed at.
This is written from the point of view of the customer.
Okay.
So I mentioned that sometimes, many times actually, projects just we get introduced to a train that's already moving a specific direction. The clients already picked Salesforce, they've already picked this cloud, they've already bought so many licenses, and we as a Salesforce practice or a systems integrator, as I, are expected to execute. And you realize when you get on a train that the train's going the wrong direction. So things like business case, like why they've chosen this and whether the partner they've chosen is the right partner, etc., it gets missed. And so I felt I needed to write the story from the client point of view and show what a model or what a good implementation might look like. And I think that's the challenge in the consulting and project delivery space, is that I might have a very good project, but there's very little opportunity to showcase why it went well. So that others may learn. So if you're in an organization, you might have lunch and learn where you talk about, various aspects of your project, but not on a more global scale. And so I felt I needed to show a kind of like a model project delivery where the client finds out that they've got a problem. What do they do about that? So they figure out they need a CRM. So the protagonist in the book decides he's got to do a business case. What does that business case look like? So the book at the back has got a simple business case for people to look at. How do you calculate the ROI? And how he went to the next stage, which is an RFP. And then as I wrote it, I had some really interesting discussions about, should you have an RP? Shouldn't you have an RP? So I kind of discussed it a little bit inside there, how they choose the partner. So the partner that they chose is the partner in my book one, for example, the company name and the characters in that, and how they set up that engagement for success to work with that partner all the way until go live, what happens after go live, etc. How they manage scope creep, how they manage UAT and testing and deployment and all of that. So all the things that an organization who is thinking about Salesforce or any other CRM should think about in terms of, do they have their own capability to actually execute it? If not, how should they think about the partner that they select? And so on. So I felt that would very nicely round up the, how do we make sure globally that people do more successful projects? So one from the partner side, which was book one, and one from the client side, which is book two.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm very pleased to see again that it's nice. And for those who haven't read either of Pei's books, one of the best things is that they are lovely. The illustrations are fantastic. I hope you don't mind me sharing one on screen, but it's lovely and coloured. And one of the things that I think is a bugbear of mine is too many books are black and white. And various shades of grey for tones. And I really, really loved the colourful images in there. I think it really brought things to life. So yeah, really pleased when I was flicking through it the other day to see a lot more of those lovely drawings that you do and all the colourful images in there.
Thank you. Actually, I had someone tell me that it looks like a children's colouring book, and I felt quite pleased, because one of the things that I wanted to do is make sure that it's accessible and digestible, and not I have so many books that I want to read, but there's a thought, not, I don't look forward to reading them because I feel, okay, I need to be in the right space to actually absorb the information in there and apply it. I didn't want that associated with my book. I wanted it to be, oh, let me pick this up. I can jump around and it looks interesting and it's silly and I don't take myself too seriously. And that was kind of what I want to project. So, being compared to a coloring book was not the insult that the other person expected it to be, because I didn't mind.
No, I really, really like the colours and the drawings of it. I think it's nice and memorable as well, because I think that I agree that there are too many books that are far too long and far too stuffy in some instances, and feel like a reference book is the word I'm going to use. So I've got a book on my desk over there, which is just a kind of a side example. It's called Code the Classics, and it is a bunch of old programming code for old video games. Like I personally really find it interesting, but let's be clear that I am probably in a minority of people that would pick that up and go, oh yeah, I picked it up when I was on away with my family, and my brother, who is not into programming at all, picked it up, flicked through it, and was like, why have you bought this to read? What are you? But it is the thing that I found really engaging about that is it is coloured and annotated, and kind of as nice bubbles out and things like that makes it so much more engaging to read, that if you are someone that kind of is into the code and understands it, having all those little call outs and fun bits on the way just makes it far more engaging. So I'm a big fan of kind of this nice bright color scheme and things like that. So if you do a third book, please don't change it. Please definitely keep it up. So yeah, we've kind of gone through obviously your first the two books and kind of your transition into you run your organization and why you kind of set up to do so. So I suppose the kind of final question really is on the journey that you've been going through is what's next and what are you kind of focusing on now? What's your big kind of area that you're looking at the moment, and what will you be focusing on, and what can people get excited about next?
Oh, I think that I'm one of the luckiest person I know. I get to do a lot of things that I really love, and one of the things that um, I want to do is all the lessons that I've taken. I want to be able to share it in a way that I can. So you're saying I actually have 7 books that I'm thinking about. So it
Wow.
kind of started with Red Book, and my husband said, um, you know enough to write 7 books on different topics, and I've already structured them. So the colors of the rainbow just so happens to be. So you got the red book and you've got the indigo. One of them that's in my head would be customer success. Actually, the very next one it would be Salesforce Consulting 101,
Mhm.
which is focusing on the career and the day in the life of, and how a person could actually take that career and move it forward themselves. So that would be the next one. And then I've got project management, I've got QA, a little bit more agnostic,
Mhm.
but the concept of testing, UAT test strategy, entry exit criteria, definition of severity, and all these sort of things. So I've got a lot of that to come. I'm co-authoring with 2 other people on documentation, diagramming, and project leadership and delivery. And so those are the book side. And on the course side, I've got another 3 courses. So I will be launching today my very first course, which is Consulting Fundamentals. So 1 week, 30, 60, 90-day action plan for somebody who's just started in the role, because a lot of partners don't have onboarding
No.
or really strong induction. So I want to aim this at the new consultant. And then I've got another 3 courses coming out throughout this year, which is emotional intelligence and advanced communication, which is the difficult conversations. And then I've got power, politics, stakeholder management, because in my MBA I did power and politics. It's a really interesting subject for me.
Mhm.
And if you understand people, you can understand how to influence them as well. And part of our job is we are agents of change, as I tell my team. Um, and it's only successful if we can help them leverage the platform, change behaviors to actually, get benefit. So the third one. And the fourth one will be the discovery. So breaking down the first book and my
Mhm.
masterclass into something where they can see what good looks like. This is what a document looks like. This is what user story looks like. This is how you do a process map for as-is and to-be. How do you drop down the user stories and opportunities for improvement and efficiencies? So we've got these 3 courses coming out the rest of the year. And then I need to do one on project management and how to do commercials with statement of work and how do you estimate correctly and properly. So there's like a lot of things in my head that I want to turn into something that people can take and, you know, put in their career and their life. So lots of things.
That is a lot of things. That is a very exhaustive list. So I mean, that's fantastic, and I look forward to seeing more of these books so that I can have a nice little rainbow on the shelf of them all, and seeing how the course is going, things like that. Um, so first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, Pei, for coming on and giving us your time today and sharing all your kind of experience and your knowledge. One of the things that I always ask at the end of these conversations is if there's one sort of tip or trick or piece of advice that you would give to someone who's been listening, and technical, non-technical, Salesforce, non-Salesforce, it could just be drink more water, whatever it is. Do you have a piece of advice for people? Because you've covered off a load for us in terms of making sure just even talking about listening better. We only really kind of touched that briefly in an area, but it's such an important skill. So is there one piece of advice, and I say one, is there some advice that you would give to a listener on how they can improve their life or career, and just something that Pei would recommend?
Very quickly, I'm listening to a current podcast by Andrew Huberman and Josh Witkin. So he's someone who was a child prodigy, playing chess. So he was the inspiration for searching for Bobby Fischer, for example. And then he went into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he did lots of things. And the ideas about learning, so how he teach himself, how to teach other people. And he said one phrase which I really like, which is, there's no point, this has to do with chess, but also to life as well. There's no point planning 50 moves deep if your second move is wrong. And if we apply it to everything else, even on projects, even on like life, and I listen to many life stories when I'm on my shifts, is that everyone is so focused on what they want without asking, why do I feel that that is the most important thing right now? And instead of doing this forward focus, to come right back to why did I decide to become a consultant? Why am I deciding that Salesforce is the big thing that I should be focusing on, or Agentforce, or AI, whatever that might be? So just stepping back and doing some self-reflection and asking why actually saves a lot more pain down the road. It feels like it can feel counterintuitive to slow down and stop and look and ask, but a lot of people also don't want to do that, is because they may not want to discover the real reason. So for example, like, your parents might say, you should be a doctor, put you on, this really expensive medical degree. And if you did ask yourself, you might think, well, actually, I hate this. And then I got to talk to my parents. So a lot of people don't do that, and they set themselves up for a life of, not a happy life. So just pulling yourself back and just asking why, and being more reflective and self-aware I think would be the one thing I would leave everyone with.
That is a fantastic piece of advice, and I really like the chess piece about 50 moves ahead if your second move is wrong. Well, thank you once again, Pei, for joining us today. Thank you for listening along as well. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. We'd love to hear in the comments below, what you've learned and any additional learnings you have, and if you've read Pei's books, what you think about them. You can find them both on Amazon and other places, I'm sure, as well. So make sure you go and grab a copies of those. If you've enjoyed the episode, please remember to leave a like or a review on your podcast player of choice, and you can subscribe using the link below, or again on your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and once again, thank you, Pei, for joining us here on CloudBites Conversations.
You're welcome. It was super fun. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll see you soon. Bye now.
Bye.